Hello, my name is Michael Stopa and welcome to the YouthBuild AmeriCorps budget tutorial. The purpose of this video is to give you a better understanding of how to fill out and submit your AmeriCorps operating budget by going through our budget template step by step. A good budget and strong budgeting practices are the backbone of protecting the investment and are the first steps to starting out your AmeriCorps grant year. Our budget template has an overview section at the top where you can check various information about your grant, including your grant award, slot allotment, your site and eGrants ID, your provided admin rate, and your monthly reimbursement due dates. It's important to check this information before starting your budget to make sure that all the information here is correct. Next, let's go over some basics. Each line of your budget is capped off by these three sections, and it's important to understand how they function so you can complete your budget correctly. The total amount should reflect what is reported by you in each line item, including using any calculations that you may present. Please note that you should round this section to the nearest dollar wherever you can. Then, you fill out the expense section. This is the amount of cost that you wish to bill to AmeriCorps. Then, the match calculation is automatically calculated by the workbook. You should not be entering this manually, nor should you manipulate these cells. Now, let's start looking at how to budget staff. It is important that all information be reported accurately, so please provide full staff names, full titles, and a position description that clearly ties each staff member to AmeriCorps. Please note that you do not need to fill out the clearance date section, as this process is handled internally at YouthBuild USA. After you have identified the staff members, you need to enter their annual salary and the percentage of time that each staff member will be billing to AmeriCorps and any match sources. Note that this percent should be an estimate, to the best of your ability, on how that staff member will be billing their time month to month. Staff members should be reporting actual hours worked, so your budget does not have to line up perfectly to how each staff member reports their time. All staff members require National Service criminal history checks in order for their salary to be an allowable cost. As such, we require NSCHC documentation to be reviewed before we approve a budget that has any staff time on it. We keep an internal database of all staff previously budgeted to AmeriCorps grants, so if a staff has been previously cleared, they will not be required to be cleared again. However, if we do not have a date on file, we will require documentation so that we can determine the date that they can begin being billed to an AmeriCorps grant. This process can slow down budget approval, so if possible, please submit this documentation ahead of time. Unfilled staff positions can be budgeted for as long as they are clearly labeled as such. Here it is written out as "to be hired," but any similar label will suffice. Note that it is on you to notify YouthBuild USA when these staff positions have been filled so the NSCHC clearance process can be initiated. Fringe costs should be broken out by each benefit, and the calculation should be clear and descriptive about what the staff are or are not included. You should use this exact calculation rounded to the nearest dollar to get the total amount. Please note that if any fringe amount is over 30%, you will be required to break it out line by line. The member and staff travel sections should be used for all costs that are associated with travel that is explicitly for AmeriCorps activities. This can include travel to and from service sites or any vehicle costs that are associated with AmeriCorps activities. This includes the AmeriCorps Management Conference, which is a requirement for all sub-grantees to attend. As always, calculations should be clearly labeled and descriptive. Costs associated with staff or members should reference how many of those parties those costs are associated with. As such, you should never exceed the amount of allotted slots if you are billing costs that are associated with members. Supplies should be broken out by what those supplies are being used for. This example uses the ones provided in the budget template, however you may need more or less than this. As these costs are sometimes just whole amounts, you are not required to provide a calculation, however you should still provide one if you can. Allowable and unallowable costs should be considered when budgeting supplies. If we see a cost that could potentially not be allowable, we may reach out for clarification. If an individual item exceeds $1,000, please include it as its own line item. Keep this in mind when budgeting large purchases. All contractors or consultants, unless they are working explicitly on evaluation, should be budgeted here. Often these are things like trainings or services that are provided to your young people or staff that are not provided internally. This includes any work provided pro bono that you wish to use as in-kind match. The rate should be whatever rate has been agreed upon by you and the contractor, whether this rate is daily, weekly, or monthly. This example breaks it out over a 4-month contract, $1,500 per month. Please note that contractors require an extra piece of documentation. This outside contractor form is available in Dropbox and should be submitted along with your budget. Staff and member trainings should be budgeted here. As always, use calculations whenever possible. This includes referencing the number of staff and/or members that will be using the training. Employee trainings and professional development may not be allowable, so if the training does not apply directly to AmeriCorps in an obvious way, please get it approved before submitting your budget. Evaluations should only be budgeted if those evaluations include your AmeriCorps programming. Things like programmatic impact evaluations are the type of things that could potentially be budgeted for here, although they should be allocated properly. If these evaluations are being done by a contractor, you will need to fill out the same contractor form that we previously spoke about. Other program operating costs is a catch-all section for costs that are not appropriate to fit in the other named sections of the budget. Common costs that are usually included here include occupancy, utilities, drug testing, background checks, but many more can be included. Please use your best judgment and discretion when filling this section out. As always, if you have any questions if a cost can be included on your budget, always ask us first. If your program has a full or half-time member and you wish to pay them a member living allowance, then you will budget that cost here. The requirements on how much you have to pay your full and half-time members changes yearly, so please follow the directions in your workbook when filling out this section of the budget. Additionally, the required member support cost varies state by state, so please check which you are required to provide to your members before submitting your AmeriCorps budget. If you have more questions, please refer to the various full-time member resources we have provided within our help docs. If your program does not have its own federally approved indirect rate, you should budget any indirect here using method A. An indirect rate of 5.26% is allowed to be used as expense, and a 10% de minimis rate is allowed to be applied for match. This example uses YouthBuild USA's internal calculation for the 10% de minimis. However, there are many ways you can do this at your own site. If you have any questions on how to calculate your 10% de minimis rate, please reach out to us or refer to any of CNCS's online resources. If your site does have its own federally approved indirect rate, please budget for it using method B. All calculations should be clearly described, and please remember to submit a copy of your indirect letter along with your budget. Match sources should be listed at the bottom of your budget and should be labeled accurately and clearly. You should always use the full name of the funder in the name of source section rather than the name of any individual grant or other identifying details. Please remember to label it as cash or in kind and then label the source type. Please remember, federal awards are not allowed to be used as match. The onus is on the subgrantee to confirm that any grant is not federal pass-through money before using it as match. The purpose line should clearly state what section or sections of the budget a source is paying for, and the amount should tie monetarily to these sections. In this example, we see that each funder is clearly labeled. For instance, the Brandon Kepper Construction Associates source has a purpose that directly references the construction training that was listed in the Contractual and Consultant Services section of the budget. The source is being used for a wide variety of costs, such as the Massachusetts Department of Education grant listed here, then you can state what that grant is not being used for in order to clear up any questions. In this case, it is being used to cover the remaining non-personnel costs. If you are unsure if a grant can be used as match, please remember to ask us first. Remember, all in-kind donations require an additional form of documentation. This in-kind contribution form needs to include the following: date of donation, description of the donated good or service, valuation, location of the donation, and have the donor's name and signature. YouthBuild USA provides a form for its sites to use within Dropbox. However, you may use your own internal forms or use any official in-kind donation letters that donors provide, as long as they meet this criteria. And now let's go over some best practices. Please, always round to the nearest dollar. Don't wait to be asked. Submit all extra paperwork along with your budget. This includes any CHC documentation, in-kind contribution forms, or outside contractor forms. Always keep RAD in mind. Budgeted costs need to be reasonable, allowable, allocable, and documented. If you ever have any questions or concerns that something can or cannot be included on your budget, you are always welcome to just ask us. And finally, remember that your budget is just an estimate to the best of your ability on how you will be spending over the course of the grant year. It does not have to tie exactly to spending. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions, please reference our help docs or contact the team directly at AmeriCorps@youthbuild.org. As always, you can also contact your AmeriCorps financial manager directly.